Ladies and gentlemen, we were never created to be average. Inside every one of us is the seed of greatness, the blueprint of dominion, the call to lead. But leadership and effectiveness are not gifts we stumble upon. They are cultivated habits, shaped by vision, discipline, and value. Today, I want to speak not to your ears, but to your potential. There are principles, timeless, unshakable truths that determine who rises and who simply survives. And these principles are found in the 7 habits of highly effective people. Let me begin with this truth. You don't decide your future, you decide your habits, and your habits decide your future. The first habit is being proactive. Life does not respond to wishes. It responds to action. You were not created to be a victim of circumstance. You carry power, the power of choice. Highly effective people don't wait for change. They initiate it. They don't react. They respond with wisdom. They don't complain. They create. The second habit, begin with the end in mind. You were born for a reason. There's a purpose that preceded your existence. If you don't know where you're going, any road will take you nowhere. Highly effective people live with intention. They measure every decision against their destiny. They don't drift. They design their lives. The third habit, put first things first. Purpose demands priorities. Not everything that screams is important. Effective people don't live by pressure. They live by principle. They don't let urgent things rob them of important things. Discipline is the bridge between goals and growth. Then growth. Think win-win. A life is not a battlefield for domination. It's a garden for collaboration. Highly effective people don't compete. They complete. They seek solutions where everyone rises because they understand. When you lift others, you elevate yourself. The fifth habit, seek first to understand, then to be understood. This is not just about communication. It's about connection. Effective people listen with empathy. They don't hear to respond. They hear to respond. They hear to relate. Alone, you may move fast, but together we move far. Highly effective people know that one can chase 1,000, but 2 can chase 10,000. They embrace diversity, not as a threat, but as a treasure. And finally, sharpen the soul. You cannot pour from an empty vessel. Rest is not laziness. It is wisdom. Growth is not automatic. It is intentional. Highly effective people invest in their body, soul, and spirit because they know if you don't maintain the source, you lose the strength. Let me leave you with this. Your habits are prophecy in motion. They are writing the story of your legacy. If you want to change your life, don't change your goals first. Change your habits. Because effectiveness is not an accident. It's a lifestyle. Effectiveness is not a performance you put on when people are watching, but a reflection of who you are when no one is around. Because techniques may impress temporarily, but character sustains influence permanently. And while you can manipulate results with charm or clever methods for a moment, it is the weight of integrity that carries the true currency of trust in the long run, since technique is like paint on rust, covering decay without addressing the source. But character is the steel beneath the surface, unshakable. Even when the storms of life try to erode your foundation, and so effectiveness, the ability to produce consistent, meaningful, and lasting impact cannot rest on tricks, shortcuts, or image, but must be grounded in values that do not change with applause or silence, success or struggle. A person who builds their life on techniques may rise quickly like a house on sand, fragile and vulnerable, dependent on the environment to stay upright, because when pressure comes and trials reveal what is hidden, it is not the polished technique that stands firm, but the quiet strength of character forged in private battles and disciplined decisions and sacred promises, kept when it would have been easier to quit. Because effectiveness is not about doing more things right, but about doing the right things for the right reasons in the right spirit, even when no one gives you credit. And that's why character outlives charisma every single time. You can teach someone how to speak well, how to negotiate, how to manage time or set goals or build a brand or craft a message that sells. But if what they say is not backed by the truth of who they are, then the technique becomes a tool of deception instead of a vessel of purpose. And what's tragic is that people often trade depth for display. They learn methods to look effective without becoming effective, because they forget that effectiveness is not a style. It's a substance, and substance is formed not in front of crowds, but in the quiet crucible of self-honesty, discipline, and devotion to values that don't bend under pressure. And it's in the silence of those unseen moments, the decisions no one will know about, the temptations resisted not out of fear, but out of conviction, that true effectiveness is born, because the fruit is always a result of the root. and if the root is corrupted, diseased by inconsistency, poisoned by pretense, then no matter how beautiful the leaves look for a season, they will wither in time, because what sustains you is not your gift, but your grounding. And that's why character must come before craft, principles before personality, truth before technique. We live in a world that celebrates results more than roots, that gives standing ovations to performance while ignoring the quiet labor of preparation. But if you want to last, if you want to be effective not just once but always, then you must build your effectiveness not on the shifting side, popularity or trends or borrowed techniques, but on the solid, ancient, immovable rock of character. Because when your motive is pure, your methods become powerful and not the other way around. And the difference is night and day when pressure tests the core of what you really believe. There are many who knew how to win for a season, but lost themselves in the process because they mastered technique without mastering self. They conquered markets, but couldn't conquer their own ego. They learned how to climb, but didn't know how to stay grounded. And so they fell not from lack of strategy, but from lack of character. Because effectiveness that isn't built on values is a castle in the sky, beautiful to look at, but destined to crash. And so we must return to the inner life, the soul, the discipline of becoming before doing, episode of being before broadcasting, of substance before spotlight. You may not have the most polished technique. You may not know every new method or trend or hack. But if your heart is clean, if your word means something, if your decisions are guided by honor, and your actions aligned with truth, then you are already more effective than many who have mastered the art of performance but lost the power of authenticity. Because what the world needs is not more performers. It needs more people of depth, of integrity, who understand that effectiveness is not just reaching goals, but doing so in a way that leaves no regrets, no shame. And so the question is not how good you are at getting results, but how aligned your results are with righteousness, because effectiveness that flows from character is unstoppable, unshakable, and undeniable. It may not always be the fastest path, but it will always be the one that lasts. Before you can lead others, you must first master yourself, because public victory without private discipline is nothing more than a performance on a crumbling stage. And while people may applaud your results, only you know whether the roots of those results were integrity or illusion. Because what is done in the light is only as strong as what is built in the dark, and no title, no platform, no applause can substitute for the quiet conquests of the soul that no one sees but God and your own conscience, because private victory is waking up early when no one's watching, saying no when temptation whispers, choosing humility when pride would be easier, and it is in those small, silent decisions that greatness is forged. You cannot export what you have not cultivated internally, and too many are trying to influence the world without first influencing themselves, trying to lead nations while losing battles in their own hearts, and they forget that charisma can take you where only character can keep you. And when the applause fades and the spotlight moves on, it is only the privately victorious who are left standing, because they were never standing on the crowd's praise. They were standing on discipline, consistency, and conviction that didn't begin on stage, but in silence and sacrifice. Self-control. It's easy to desire the crown without the cross, to want the reward without the refinement. But public success without private strength is a setup for collapse, because without the inner foundation, success becomes a burden instead of a blessing. And it crushes the unprepared with its weight, because the victory that everyone sees must be sustained by the victories no one sees. And that means you win long before the crowd claps. You win when you say no to shortcuts, when you serve before you're seen, when you sharpen your mind, your habits, your values in the unseen spaces where no credit is given but character is built. Private victory is choosing responsibility over excuses, stewardship over sloppiness, truth over trend, and it's in those secret choices where you become someone that success can trust, because if the inner world is fractured, the outer world will eventually reflect it. No matter how beautiful the image looks temporarily, because you cannot outrun the law of integrity. What you plant in the dark will grow in the light, and if you have not conquered pride, fear, laziness, addiction, insecurity, or ego behind the curtain, they will sabotage your destiny when it finally opens wide. Public victory looks like influence, followers, achievements, headlines, but private victory is peace, clarity, self-respect, and sleep without guilt. And it is that kind of victory that allows you to walk into the room and not need validation, not seek permission, because you already affirmed yourself in the quiet hours where truth mattered more than likes and alignment meant more than applause. And that inner wholeness becomes the invisible engine behind sustainable impact, because you're not showing up to impress You're showing up because you are already complete. When you live from private victory, your confidence is not arrogance. It's alignment. It's not performance. It's presence, because you've already fought the hard battles and you've already proven to yourself that your values are more than quotes. They're choices you live daily. And so the public arena doesn't change who you are. It simply reveals what you've built. And that's why public failure often follows when private compromise is tolerated. Not because life is unfair, but because life is precise, and it always exposes the foundation, whether built on rock or sand. Private victory is not glamorous. It's quiet, it's hidden, it's repetition without recognition. It's doing what's right when no one would know if you didn't. And yet it is there that real kings and queens are crowned long before the world ever hears their names. Because the private victory is the rehearsal for the public assignment, the proving ground that determines whether you'll rise with stability or collapse under visibility. And so before you post, before you preach, before you perform, you must practice, you must prepare, you must purify. Because what you haven't conquered in private will confront you in public. And so if you want to last, if you want to lead with legacy and not just momentary success, then stop focusing on being seen and start focusing on becoming someone who has already won the war within. Because when you win in secret, you carry a strength that no storm can shake. And that is why private victory always precedes public victory. When you live without the end in mind, you drift through life reacting to demands, pulled by distractions, seduced by noise, always busy but rarely becoming, always moving but never arriving. And it is only when you pause and define the destination that the journey takes on meaning. Because intention without vision is just effort without direction. And the truth is, you were never meant to live by accident or by default or by culture script. You were designed to live with purpose, on purpose for purpose, which means you must begin, not at the beginning, but at the end. Because only when the end is clear does every choice start to align. To live intentionally with the end in mind is to reverse engineer your life from legacy, to ask not what you want to get, but what you want to leave, to build not just success, but significance, not just moments, but meaning, because the end is not just about death, it's about destination. About what kind of person you became, what kind of impact you made, what values outlived your voice. And once that vision is settled, once that picture of purpose is clear, you stop letting people and trends define your direction, and you begin to say no to what distracts, yes to what aligns. And discipline stops feeling like punishment and starts feeling like peace. When you live with the end in mind, you stop chasing everything and start choosing what matters, because not everything deserves your energy. Not every opportunity is aligned with your assignment, and not every urgent thing is important to your outcome. And when you have the end in view, your calendar becomes a canvas of purpose, your habits become sacred, your relationships become intentional, and you begin to measure your actions not by how they feel in the moment, but by whether they move you closer to the future you were born to build. Because drifting may feel easier, but only design delivers legacy. Living intentionally is not about rigid control. It's about conscious alignment. It's not about being busy. It's about being aimed. It's not about being perfect. It's about being clear. It's clarity births clarity. And the clearer your end, the more confident. Every delay, every distraction, because you're not guessing, you're not wondering, you're moving with purpose. And when the end is strong enough, your why becomes louder than your weariness, and your mission becomes greater than your mood. And that's what separates those who last from those who fade. You see, a life without the end in mind becomes a life filled with regret, with things that looked important but weren't eternal, with trophies that don't translate to peace, with applause that didn't produce fulfillment. And so many reached the top of ladders leaning against the wrong wall, chasing what they were told to want, only to find that they gained the world and lost themselves because they never stopped to ask, what kind of legacy am I building? And that's why the wise don't just run, they pause, they reflect, they plan backward. They plant seeds today that will still speak when their voice is gone. To live intentionally with the end in mind is to walk through life with both feet in the present and your heart anchored in eternity. It is to let tomorrow's purpose dictate today's choices. It is to let vision filter your decisions, to let values guard your priorities. Because every yes is a seed and every no is protection. And when your end is clear, your path gets narrow, not limiting, but liberating. Because when you know where you're going, you no longer need to go everywhere. The intentional life is not loud, but it is firm. It is not rushed, but it is resolved. It is not flashy, but it is faithful. And those who live with the end in mind carry a stillness that cannot be shaken by chaos, because they're not living for the next thrill. They're living for the final chapter. And they understand that every day is either a deposit toward that destiny or a detour away from it. So they stay anchored, focused, consistent, not perfect, but purposeful, because the end gives meaning to the middle and direction to the details. And so if you truly want to live, not just exist, not just achieve, not just perform, but live with peace, with clarity, with purpose that outlives your possessions, then set your eyes on the end, define the kind of person you want to become, the kind of legacy you want to leave, the kind of story you want your life to tell, and let that vision govern your steps, shape your schedule, and fuel your soul. Because only those who live with the end in mind truly live with intention.